throw my way. I know your name is written on everyone's mind.
Welcome back to the 27. This is a setup analysis for the Copa Classic Chevette. In the midst of some major YouTube activity involving the breadth and scope of the Racing USA DLC, endurance, multi-class, weather, Nordschleife at Daytona, I decided to feature the Chevette. So I might be going down as the worst YouTuber in history, but I can live with that because you know what? This was a request from a channel supporter and I'm starting to love the ideas you guys come up with. I asked Norbsy what his favorite car was and what build he wanted to see or something along those lines, and I half expected, a complicated racing machine with aero concerns and four-way dampers, the whole shebang. And he came up with the Chevette, which has no shebang. It's basically a 1974 classic racing club car. He even suggested the featured track, Long Beach. Of course, why not? So this is his way of telling you through me that this car is a blast, and I agree. It's the kind of car that you drive when you just want to have fun. There are a lot of cars like this in AMS2, the kind of cars that don't take themselves too seriously, but how do I explain this? They are still quite challenging in their own peculiar way. This is in fact only the second or third time I've driven an open differential car in AMS2 with any seriousness, so I can't say that I'm a specialist with these things. But on a certain level, it shouldn't matter. The Chevette is mainly a technique car, a momentum car. And it may take a while to fully understand it from that perspective, but therein lies the compelling nature of this hobby we call sim racing. But I'm not going to sit here and say I phoned this one in. No, I did my due diligence with the Chevette. So here are my thoughts on the changes I made and the thought process behind them. When I started my analysis, the reality of the Chevette being an open differential car dictated the conversation. Open differentials you will find on road cars. The one in your driveway most likely has one. But it's not a performance differential. The reason being, with an open differential, when one drive wheel loses traction, more power is sent to that wheel, leaving less power for the wheel with traction. This applies to ice, puddles, leaving the ground, but in this case, burnouts, especially while cornering. You'll notice this with an open differential car on the edge of traction. You'll hit the power and the car will bog down. You'll be going nowhere until the car regains some traction. This is the primary technique of driving open diff cars that you need to be aware of. The circumstances that cause the diff to open and the technique on how to regain traction as quickly as possible. So my approach was one like I would use with any other car, race car. I tried to find solutions that limited when the differential would open. Softening the rear springs, ARBs, dampers. Planting the rear end of the car basically. But when I took it out on track, much to my chagrin, I was slower than before. The reason turned out to be due to the fact that by softening the rear of the car, the weight shift, the rearward weight shift I should say, under acceleration, was too much and caused too much understeer. The car had trouble rotating, but the real reason was Long Beach itself. With all of those bumps, the rear of the car didn't have sufficient damping. So any traction gain that I found turned out to be lost due to the tires bouncing. The happy balance I found was to move to the front of the car and make changes there. I softened the front springs to handle the bumps and stiffened the front dampers and ARBs to the max. I found that this helped the car glide into the corner a little bit better for comfort, but also to get the appropriate initial reaction to the steering inputs to get the car rotated. That way I could get onto the power maybe just a fraction sooner. In order to maximize this, one thing you may notice is the toe angle. I increased the negative toe angle on the front more than I usually do. The tire wear and heat concerns of endurance racing aren't necessarily a major concern with the Chevette. So what I was looking for was a nice reactive and grippy front end. With softer front springs but stiffer, more reactive ARBs and dampers, the car responded to those necessary wheel inputs to get the car rotated and then straightened out for throttling. For the rear suspension, there really wasn't much else to do but to make sure that the car had traction and followed the front without getting too far out of shape. So let's take a look at the telemetry. So here we are with Racing Sim Tools, and if you look at the top left, you can see that I registered a default session and then also a custom session. I think I gained about 3/10 on my best lap in each setup arrangement, but overall maybe around 3 or 4 seconds gained through the course of the 3-lap stint. But the first thing I wanted to direct you to was the differential section. This is what an open differential looks like. So basically I'm directing you to the second and third graphs here, the second and third here on the list. And these spikes here, that's the differential basically opening up, and you can see this on power. As soon as you start hitting the power, the car just bogs down until traction is regained. Now this is just something that you have to play with an open differential. It's something you have to get used to, and that's what I mentioned, but that's why I mentioned it before as a technique. Open differential cars require their own kind of throttling and steering, so you can get the tires biting again. Next thing I wanted to point out was the dampers, the damper histograms. Damper histograms measure the travel of each of the damper systems, and I think with the Chevette it only has a 2-way damping package, so it'll have a bump side and a rebound side, basically controlling the springs. It doesn't matter if it's the car weight shifting or if it's going over bounces, the dampers act the same. So if you take a look at the default package, this was interesting to me. The fronts, they favored the rebound side. That means they were absorbing the bump very well, but the tire wasn't going back on the track as best as they could. And same thing with the rears. The rear tires would hit a bump, they would go up into the car and absorb the energy from the bump, but they wouldn't retract as quickly as fast as they could, or as appropriately as they could. They call that critical damping. So here we balanced them out, and I think we got a really nice, pretty damper histogram. Peter, take a look at this one, baby. All right, so moving on, we're going to go to the run tab, and here you can see this is the wear. I mentioned this in the video. I wasn't really concerned about tire wear so much as I was with the cambering, which I think I figured out a better way to camber and pressure the tires. All these graphs don't really make that much sense. They can look like gobbledygook, but essentially I cambered the front tires appropriately, the rear tires appropriately, and then I set the pressures so that they have an optimal contact patch. I think that's a good baseline for where you need to be when you're driving these cars. And then when you get into the Chevette and you take it under extreme conditions, you can make the adjustments yourself. But let's go back to the wear real quick. It turns out that I actually increased the amount of wear. This is the default package, and then this is the custom package. But do you think that's worth it for about 3 to 4 seconds over the course of three laps? I think it's worth it. So finally, let's go to the traction circle. I love the traction circle. Here's another interesting thing. The red is my lap. Let me make it so it's a little bit more visible for you. Red is my lap, and then the blue is the default lap. And reference down here, straight line braking, the default package just does a great job, and actually it has some really good cornering grip. So the build wasn't necessarily about finding grip to the max degree, but making it a little bit more controllable. But I also want to point out these areas right here. These are the trail braking areas. This is when you're entering the corner and you're under braking and you're releasing the brakes and you start to corner. This is where that control comes from, and I thought that was an interesting component to this as well. So there we go, the 1974 Copa Classic Chevette. Just when I finish describing how a car is fun and not to take it too seriously, I go ahead and take it too seriously. It's a personal problem that I have, people. Okay, I am self-aware. The ultimate point is, maybe I can help you a little bit under the brakes and give you a controllable drift. But either way, just go out there and have some fun. Coming up, we have the Ultima GTR, another request. I think it's a polarizing car a little bit. Some people like it and maybe some people don't. Oh, the Boltcast, the first AMS2 podcast, was just released this past Monday. Please check it out, and I hope you enjoy. In the meantime, thanks for watching, have fun, and take care.